All right, so chapter 9. Remember again, we've now set the table. We have set the boundaries of reality, in theory. We've picked one extreme, which is the perfect competition. We've picked the other extreme, monopoly. And now we're going to try and pick somewhere in the middle. And economists will break the middle up into two parts, okay? That's as far as we want to go. If you get into a longer microeconomics class, you may get deeper into these things, but in this, we are going to have two separate spots. One is the monopolistic competition, and what that is that it's somewhere over here on the left-hand side. In other words, it's closer to a perfect competition than it is to a monopoly, but it's not perfect, right? So there's not an infinite number of sellers, but there's a lot of them, all right? And then the other side of the coin, which hopefully we will get today, is not a monopoly, but an oligopoly, because, of course, oligo means few, whereas mono means one, all right? So let's start with the monopolistic competition. Please note that this word is in the phrase, competition. That means that there's people competing. That means there needs to be a fair number of sellers. So our first trait, or its characteristic, is that there are lots of sellers. Please note that there are not lots and lots and lots of sellers, just lots, right? Just one lots instead of three lots, so that you don't get the two competitions confused, okay? Think of this as less than a perfect competition, okay? So number two is, what kind of a product do we have? And in a monopolistic competition, differentiation is king. So the idea is that you're competing. And in this particular market, there are lots of you, but there are not so many of you that you can't differentiate yourself from your neighbors, right? So the idea here is that if you happen to be making hamburgers, you may be able to tell people that you have 2 all-beef patties, special sauce, lettuce, cheese, pickles, onions on a sesame seed bun, and that makes you better. Or somebody might ask you, where's the beef? And you would get to tell them, oh yeah, it's right here. Or someone might tell you that, well, if you get beef from me, you get to have it your way, right? Exactly. Right. So you get the idea. Is there a real difference between a burger from McDonald's or a burger from Burger King or a burger from, what was the other one I used? Wendy's. There might be, but in the grand scheme of things, folks, no, they're all burgers. And the meat is probably pretty close to the same from all of them. It really is. There is no difference. They all get them from a Cisco truck. And the Cisco truck gets it from wherever they happen to get it from, right? Some of it's from U.S. beef, most of it's from Brazilian beef, whatever, okay? They really aren't the same. Anybody who analyzes meat in the fast food industry and says that the meat is different, they've been paid by that person to say it's different, right? I mean, that's the way it works, right? If Wendy's gave me $500,000 to test beef, guess what would happen to Wendy's beef? It's awesome. It's the best. It's the grade A. Of course it is. Folks, money talks, okay? Anyway, that's the idea. These types of markets are the markets you know best because you are constantly being bombarded with advertising saying that we're better, we're better, we're better. And oh, by the way, because we're better, you might want to pay just a little bit more. right? I mean, you could probably go to the grocery store and buy beef and make a hamburger, and it would be a tenth of the price of what you're paying at any of these stores. Why don't you? Exactly, because they have convinced you that it's good. Okay. Now, how easy is it to get in and out of these markets? Yeah, it's relatively easy to get in and out. It's not as easy as getting in and out of a perfect competition, right? I mean, if you're competing in the feed corn industry, right, it's pretty easy to buy different seed the next year, right? I mean that. Whereas if you're competing in fast food industry, it takes a little time to convert your McDonald's into a Pizza Hut. You know, it maybe a month, maybe a couple $1,000s. But in the end, in the grand scheme of business, what's a few $1,000s? Chump change, right? Probably the licensing that you purchase from the different company that you are affiliated with costs more than it takes to actually convert your business. Right? I mean, the licensing, what is it, $100,000 a year to be licensed by McDonald's? Right. Yeah. Franchising fees are not cheap, folks. That's why McDonald's is a very good company, right? Every franchise pays them $100,000 to have the arches in front of their store. Think about the number of McDonald's that are out there, folks. $100,000 each to the corporation. Yeah, McDonald's doesn't hop and skip all the way to the bank. No. Right? Right? It's a little less. McDonald's is one of the best, so they're the most expensive. The other ones aren't quite that bad. Wendy's is only like 60 or 70 grand. Burger King's actually less. It's back down to 50 grand, which is cheap if you think about it. But the fact remains that it's there. It is mildly expensive, but relatively easy. Okay? So those are our characteristics. Now, do we get to set the price? Kind of. I mean, of course you do. And we've made sure that we have a different product. We've told you time and time and time again that the products are different. You should know that by now. We've paid millions of dollars in advertising to convince you that they're different. Therefore, they are. Yeah. You do have to keep it in others. There does have to be some level of price concern, but you still get to set your price, right? You can, if you decide to create an Angus burger, charge $6 for the burger, right? And it's way better than the regular quarter-pound burger, right? Because it had to come from an Angus cow, right? So basically all those Brazilian cows, guess what their name is? Angus. So now it's Angus beef. Whew, thank goodness. Probably not true, but it's probably not too far from true. Okay? Okay, but we do get to set the price. With a twist, which you will see in a little bit. All right, now, what was number 5? That was profit, or is that demand? Okay. So what does demand look like for these guys? Is it downward sloping? Come on, demand. Well, it's definitely downward sloping, right? It has to be downward sloping, because if it's not downward sloping, folks, then you're a price taker, right? Remember what a perfect competition is, right? They're the ones that have perfectly elastic demand, and then they get stuck taking the price. So in order to set the price, you have to have downward sloping, okay? So these two things tend to go hand in hand, right? Normally I don't separate them, but this year I did, just so I'd have more numbers. It is, though, right? There's, we'll get to that one, right? Because that's number 7, right? Guess what we profit maximize? Where did we profit maximize on a monopoly and in a perfect competition? Amen. That does not change. And as Jeremy was trying to tell me a little bit ago, yes, for our demand. Remember over there in the Monopoly, I said that demand was mostly inelastic. Mostly inelastic because our products were unique in a monopoly, right? You couldn't find substitutes for them. In a monopolistic competition, are there substitutes? Well, hell yeah, right? I mean, if you're advertising, you're trying to tell people that the substitutes are worse because yours is better. Therefore, there are substitutes. So here, we have to make sure that our demand is more elastic. What kind of a demand curve is more elastic? If it's perfectly elastic, it's straight. But we want that one that's just more elastic, not perfectly elastic. It slopes a little, a lot, right? The inelastic ones are the steep ones. That's what a monopoly gets because they have a unique product. Nobody else can compete against them. Here, oh crap, unfortunately McDonald's and Wendy's are slightly the same. So they have a similar demand curve that's downward sloping, but not really steep. All right, so when we draw the graph for the demand curve of a monopolistic competition, our demand curve is flatter. Don't make it perfectly flat because then it would be a perfect competition. But don't make it really steep because then it's more like a monopoly. So, the competition part of this, that's these sorts of things, right? There's lots of competitors and it's relatively easy to get in and out. The monopoly part of this is all because of the graphing, right? In a monopoly, we drew a downward sloping demand curve, and then what did we do to get marginal revenue? We bisected. Guess what we do right here? Oh no, we still bisect. It doesn't change. So the cool part about it is that this is our demand curve. You are still going to look at the angle, figure out what halfway in between is, and that's your marginal revenue. So from a graphing perspective, monopolies, monopolistic competition, they're almost identical. The only difference is the steepness of your demand. And the idea is, as you absorb your competition, right? So imagine if Taco Bell won the franchise wars, right? You guys remember that movie with Stallone? Yeah, and what's her face? Sandra Bullock, right? Yeah, okay. If you haven't seen it, I can't remember what the name of the movie is. Is it Demolition Man? Oh, okay, cool. Classic movie, right? So the idea is, as these franchises start to disappear, as you get less and less competition, what happens to your demand curve? Keeps getting steeper and steeper and steeper and steeper, right? Until, Taco Bell takes over all of the different franchise companies that are out there, and apparently we eat grade C beef all the time. Okay. The nice part about it is that cost curves, folks, they don't change. Right? That's the nice part about the cost curves. That's why Chapter 6 was so nice. You always draw cost curves the same way for the most part. All right, so here we go. Here's our average total cost. Here's our average variable cost. Here's the marginal cost. That stuff has stayed the same. Where are we going to profit maximize? Where the math tells us to. So we say, great, here's MC, here's MR. That's the quantity that we will produce of our particular food or drug, depending on what you happen to be selling. And again, remember that you set the price along demand. So shoot that baby up. Doot. There's the price that you will charge for your burgers. You know, $2.50 or whatever it costs nowadays. All right, so my question to you is there profit in this graph that I have just drawn right now? Yes. Good. Profit is always the difference between price and at that quantity, whatever your average total cost is. Folks, that is profit per burger or fish stick or taco or pizza or whatever. Okay? Now, my question is, can that profit continue to exist? So you're making a profit at your McDonald's, you franchised, and you started one up, right? And you live somewhere where there isn't one yet, so it's the middle of nowhere. If you are making profit, will that profit last? So imagine, if you will, you fire up a franchise for McDonald's, $100,000 a year. But McDonald's tells you that on average, each franchise that starts after it is established earns approximately $200,000 in total revenue profit every year. So $100,000 of that earned revenue goes back to the corporation, $100,000 goes into your pocket. The average yearly income from a franchise of McDonald's is $100K. That's a going rate right about now. Higher on the coasts, a little bit lower here in the central Midwest. Okay. So your McDonald's is making you $100,000, which is, you know, it's a little bit more than average for the Midwest. Midwest's average, McDonald's make around 50. All right. So everybody looks around you and says, "Holy crap! Look at your McDonald's." I mean, let's face it, folks. If you're making $100,000 a year at your McDonald's, on top of the fact that you're probably having a regular job on your own, right? Just because you own a franchise doesn't mean you quit working. I mean, maybe it is, but that's only if the franchise is really earning you a lot of money. I mean, $100,000 is nothing, folks. That's gone in a flash, okay? So you're making $100,000 off your franchise, and maybe you own a farm in this middle of nowhere place, so that you're making a few $1,000s from your farm as well. So you've got a lot of money sitting around. What do you do with a lot of money? I mean, you maybe invest some of it, but I mean, are you going to drive around in a POS? No, I mean, you're gonna buy a Beamer, or you're gonna get a muscle car, or you're gonna have a nice ride, and when you drive into your McDonald's, you're gonna flash some bling, right? Because you're gonna have some rocks on your fingers, right? I mean, come on. If you've got money, you don't hide it, folks. You know you're not gonna. So everybody is watching and going, "God damn it, man! They're getting rich off of McDonald's. That's ridiculous." So what are they gonna do? That's absolutely right. Remember, it is at least relatively easy to get in, right? So if there's enough people in your city that for 6 or 7 months going, you're still raking in $100,000 or $150,000 a year from your McDonald's, someone's going to open up something. All right? It may not be another McDonald's, because those are direct competitors, and a lot of times McDonald's won't let you. The corporation will actually say no. But would Burger King say no? Hell no. And Wendy's wouldn't, and Subway wouldn't, and Pizza Hut wouldn't, right? So if somebody comes up with an idea, bam, they're in there. All right. So now they're competing. When competition happens, when there are other choices to make, what happens to this demand curve? Flattens out a little bit more, and it's probably going to drop a little bit, right? So some of your people will split 50-50. Some of your people will, be loyal to you because they believe in the 2 all beef patty special sauce lettuce cheese thing, right? I mean, McDonald's uses grade A beef, and it's massaged and it's fed beer every night so that it's this wonderfully happy cow. And when it dies of natural death, McDonald's harvests whatever is available and lovingly places the Anyways, right? But so some people will be loyal, but some people will just say, okay, now that there's a Burger King, great, I never have to go to this damn McDonald's ever again. They leave entirely. So once competition floats around, this demand curve will flatten and it will probably drop. And what happens to your profitability and to your price if your demand starts to drop and flatten out? It's going to go down. You're going to have to lower your prices, right? And what will eventually happen is that your demand curve will fall so far so that you will not make any economic profit in the long run because of this fact, right? It's relatively easy to get in and out. So if another industry comes in and starts competing with you and you're both still, say, $70,000 to $80,000 a year, you're still both making a lot of money. Now, maybe you'll have to trade in your Beamer for an Audi, but, you know, you're still driving around a nice new car, right? And you get a new one every year because, I mean, that's what you do when you got lots of money sitting around with nothing better to do with it, right? You lease it for a year, you trade back the crappy one, and you go, ooh, now I'm going to, whatever. But the fact remains is that eventually this competition lowers your price and reduces your economic profit to what is reasonable for your particular area. Now, one of the things that monopolistic competitions, they have to decide is how much differentiation do we need to do, right? So when Burger King moves into your market, and before when you were at McDonald's, you didn't do any advertising, right? Because the sign was pretty obvious. There were only 200 people in town anyways. They saw it. They knew. They came if they saw it. When you start getting competition, what do you start doing? You start advertising. You start telling them that, well, you know, we have a senior discount where if you show up, you know, if you're older than 50, we will give you 25% off on your coffee. We will, you know, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? Again, you kind of advertise to your market, right? If you're an older community, you point those sorts of things. If it's a younger community, you say, ooh, Happy Meals have good for you food. It's got a salad in it. I swear it's salad. And, you know, that's right. It's a fruit cup, right? It's good for you, and it's from McDonald's. We didn't put butter all over it. We swear. So when you have competition, you get to make a choice. So you have one of two choices in a perfect or in a monopolistic competition when the competition shows up, right? One is you can accept. When you accept competition, basically what you do is let demand fall. You give up. You're like, okay, look, yeah, there's going to be two fast food joints in my town, and I just accepted that. I'm not going to fight it at all. Some are going to go to theirs, some are going to go to mine, and as long as we're both still happy, we will both still be happy, right? We'll get to them in a second. And when this happens, you lower your price, right? I mean, you just have to, right? You say, okay, you know, Wendy's or Burger King burgers, you know, they charge $4 for a combo meal. McDonald's normally charges $5. I can't get away with that anymore. I need to lower my price to be a little in line with my competition so that people don't decide to substitute. The other avenue that you can approach is to say, no, I refuse to accept competition. Instead of trying to let demand fall, you say, okay, look, I refuse to let my demand fall. And what you do to avoid that is you say, okay, everybody, remember that there are 2 all-beef patties. You come up with a better jingle. You hire Angelina Jolie to strip in front of all the men so that that they will go buy burgers from McDonald's, right? I mean, it's it's advertising, right? Okay, and if find your favorite guy, he does the same thing, whatever, right? So you make a Mr. and Mrs. Smith movie, and you make sure that they eat McDonald's while they're both half naked on the floor, right? I mean that. You guys don't think that happens? I mean, except that it's not. That's how cigarette companies advertise. right? Is because cigarette and beer can't, beer can at least advertise on TV, but cigarette companies can't advertise on TV anymore. Where they advertise is they're in movies. I mean, the different cigarette companies pay big money to have two naked people smoke together. I mean, because that's what keeps you coming back, right? It's not the smoking, it's the sex. Okay, sorry, that's perhaps overboard a little bit. But the idea, though, is that here you want to keep the price high, right? I want my combo meal at McDonald's to be $5 instead of $4. And so I have to let people know that you get more value from your McDonald's $5 meal because there's going to be a toy in it, or, the food's got it better calorie count. But in order to do this, right, in order to tell people over and over and over again that your product is better, what do you have to do? You got to advertise. And what does advertising do to your bottom line? Costs, right? And so what happens is that instead of allowing your demand curve to drop down to the average total cost curve, guess what you do instead? You push your average total cost curve up until it's parallel with your demand curve. Those are the two choices you have in a monopolistic competition, right? So here we said let the demand curve drop until we get there. In the advertising scheme, we say, wait, we refuse to let this demand curve drop, so we're going to spend, 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 spend. Unfortunately, that's going to push your average total cost curves up. But the fact remains, you're still going to wind up at a spot where you have no economic profit. Doesn't matter, okay? Now, the nice thing about a monopolistic competition is that relatively easy to get in and out. So if you have a profit for a little while, it'll last, okay? If you have profit in a monopolistic competition, it can last for 6, 9, 12, 15, 20 months or so. But eventually, the competition is going to get in, all right? The example I love to use is Broadhead. I have to drive through there to go to Monroe every Thursday. And right now, there's one McDonald's in the city. One. And there was only one for the longest time, right? When I first started here 5 years ago, there was only one McDonald's. That was it. There was like a Tasty Freeze or something, a drive-through. It's a trailer, right? That's new. That was built in the last 5 years. Oh, yeah, that's right, the pizza spot. I thought that Subway was within the last 10 years or so.
No, I graduated high school 10 years ago and it was there.
Okay. Well, there was something that moved in the last 5 years that I had never seen there before as I was driving through.
There's a new pizza place right next to Subway.
Is that what it is? Is that pizza place?
There's two pizza places in town now.
In Broadhead? Wow. See? What happened to that other pizza place, right? They were making too much money. Well, dollar stores. Those are another one of those. But again, you see the idea, right? There was profit there for a while. What do you think has been happening to the profits at McDonald's over the last, 10 years as these places keep moving in over and over and over and over again, right? Keeps hitting them down a little bit. But if you drive by, at least for me, every time between 4 and 5, guess what? It's packed. The McDonald's has lines of cars all the way around it. That's where they go. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So that's what you do.
The one, even if you want Subway, you have to get out of your phone.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So it's ripe, folks. Ripe for another fast food, drive-throughable place, right? And there's lots of room there at the end of the road or whatever that thing is, 11 or 69 or whatever the road is, I forget. Anyways, though, it's there, and it's all this sort of analysis. Take a peek at the demand that's being going on, and can you stick yourself in there and still get some sort of short-term economic profit? So the nice part about this, folks, is that monopolistic competitions are relatively efficient, right? The reason that they're not as efficient as a perfect competition, where do monopolistic competitions waste money? Yeah, That's what makes them inefficient. Otherwise, these companies are about as efficient as they can be, right? I mean, when you go to work at a McDonald's, if you're a person flipping the burger, you know, they're going to make you flip the burger as fast as you can flip the burger, right? I mean, if you're going to be a manager, if you're going to work the register, same sort of thing, right? You are going to be, and if you're not quick enough, you know, you're back in the cleaning the toilets job. Take your pick. Because again, they're trying to be as efficient as they can, but don't forget that they all advertise, and so they're really not efficient, which is unfortunate, or fortunate depending on how you look at it, right? Because it is important to make sure that these things are different, because they're not, right? They're really basically the same thing. Okay. And that is your monopolistic competition. The cool part about it is that it's basically a merger of monopolies and perfect competitions, right? The competitions are what make it no long-run profit. I should have said that, right? No. It's a monopoly because in theory, you get to set your price and have a downward sloping demand curve, but in the end, unfortunately, your profit, if it exists, will not exist for long. It works the other way, though, as well, folks, right? If a McDonald's is losing money, that means so are the other franchises in the city. And eventually, one of them will leave, right? I mean, that someone will say, okay, this, you know, only earning $25,000 a year to have a McDonald's franchise is not worth it, right? And so they'll close shop. All right. And the cool thing about it, too, is that you can actually watch these things develop in history. So one of the things that's been happening over the last few years is that there are a lot of drug companies that had a monopoly because of their copyright laws. So they were the only ones making a specific type of drug, right? So think, you know, Viagra, which is a good one. It's one of the best examples. Now there's, you know, probably already right now, and it's only been 3 years out from the time that their license died, there are now at a dozen other different types of male enhancement drugs that you can buy. Are they better? I don't know. It's all going to get you the same result in the end. All right, so oligopolies. Nice thing about oligopolies, folks, is I will draw no graphs for an oligopoly. You are done with the graphing technique for the micro side of the world. The only three that you need to draw pictures are these three, okay? So really, there's the extreme case where there's an infinite number of them and you're perfectly elastic. There's the other extreme case where you're in a really unique and you run the world. And then there's in between, thing that I will ask you to do. Oligopolies, though, they're relatively interesting, so we'll chat about them. I will define some things, but we won't draw any pictures, just words. So, it's got to be in between a monopolistic competition and a monopoly, so it has to have more than one, but it's got to have less than a lot. So really, there really shouldn't necessarily be a whole lot of competition going on. There is competition, but we'll discuss the different ways that these guys compete. All right. Do oligopolies advertise? Yeah. Not differentiate. Differentiate, that's an E. Sometimes they advertise, sometimes they don't. It kind of depends upon the type of monopoly or oligopoly, which I will get into in a little bit. All right? And super easy, relatively easy, super hard. Guess which this one is? Yeah, relatively hard. It's relatively tough to get in and out of an oligopoly. Not impossible, but it definitely takes some work and definitely takes some capital. Your classic oligopolies would be the big box stores. Walmart, Target, Sears, JCPenney, all those sorts of things, right? But there's other good ones like the car industry, right? Chevy, Ford, Honda, Toyota, all the different ones. There's enough of them there that they are sort of competing, but maybe not, depending on how you look at it, all right? So, this purple sucks. Do you think they get to set the price? Mostly they're price setters. All right. The thing about most oligopolies is actually they don't compete on price often. They compete in other ways. All right. Anytime you're a price setter, there's two W's in downward. You have to have a downward sloping demand curve. Don't oligopoly though. If we were to draw a graph, guess where we maximize profit? Yeah, okay. Please don't forget that. Can we have long-run profit? Mostly not, but that's simply because people can compete with you, right? It used to be that JCPenney was the king of the department stores. They were the #1 sellers. Why are they not anymore? Because Walmart stepped in and beat them at their game, right? Is Walmart going to be the king of the department stores forever? Maybe. I mean, we don't know yet, right? But could there be another company that comes along and gets a better idea and designs a better department store? Sure. Is it going to happen really fast? No. So, profit will certainly last longer. Is it infinite? Forever? No guarantee. All right. This is one where if you argue eloquently enough, you could probably convince me that long-run profit will exist in this industry. I would probably agree with you. Well, remember, they will always make profit. They just won't necessarily make economic profit, right? So, and remember that the baseline profit for this is large corporations, right? So if you're investing billions of dollars, you expect your profit to be tens of millions of dollars per year. So they could probably survive on only $5 or $6 million per year, but that would be an economic loss technically. But they're still earning $6 million a year. Bastard companies, right? But I mean, again, it's expectations, right? It's how much money did they put into it to begin with. These industries are not cheap to get in. That's the general rule of it. I mean, if you're going to start your own car company, you think it's going to take $100,000 of franchising fee? No.
Well, that plus many other things.
Amen. How efficient are they? Guess what? They're somewhere in between a monopolistic competition and a monopoly. Duh. Okay? Right, so that they're not overly efficient. But sometimes. No. That's the joy of an oligopoly. right? As long as you can hand wave and dance and sing, you will be okay. To some degree. All right. Yeah, exactly, because there's no solid graph that really describes any one part of this. All right, so mostly I'm trying to set the stage for you to see the different types of oligopolies that exist. All right, so generally speaking, when you have oligopolies, the question then is, how do they compete? Because they have to compete in some fashion, right? Because there's got to be at least two of them. That means that they have to say, you know, my drugs at CVS are better than my drugs at Walgreens, right? Because the prices for those are, on average, the same, right? Now, for those of you who don't know, Walgreens and CVS actually have very different pricing schemes. But about half of the drugs are cheaper at Walgreens and the other half are cheaper at CVS. And their job is to tell you that the important drug for you are the ones that they sell cheaper, period. Oh yeah, of course, right? If you have to choose between which one to go to, you don't want to have the choice be made on how far away you are. You want it to be on the marketing that you do. So you make sure that they're close together, so that they can say, well, if I've been marketing drugs for people that are older, right, when the old person gets in the car and figures out where to go, they're not going to pick based on how close one is. They're going to pick on whichever one has the cheaper drug that they need. And then CVS and Walgreens will say, well, as you come in to get this drug, which is always in the back of the store, you are going to have to walk through the entire thing. And what do they hope to do? Sell. All right, so anyways, how do these guys compete, right? Generally, they do it through non-price methods, all right? Very rarely in an oligopoly will you hear them talk about the price, right? When you watch a car commercial, do they ever really focus on the price of the car? Never, right? When you hear them talk about plans between the different types of phones that you can buy, do they talk about how the price is a certain value based on whatever is going on there? No. Why? Because the way they're competing is not through price, right? The oligopoly knows that you're sucked into their market, right? So all they have to do is convince you to buy from me than the other guy. And on average, their prices will be roughly the same. Now, obviously, if you're a savvy shopper, you can figure out which one is cheaper. But guess how many of the average Americans are savvy? Unfortunately, very few of us. All right, so let me make sure I get all of these down so I don't screw it up. All right, so one of the classic examples where price can come into play a little bit is a price leadership market. And this is the big box stores, all right, right now at least. In a price leadership setting, one major company, that's an M, I swear, runs the show. Think Walmart. So of the big box stores right now, when Walmart comes out with an advertisement that says these Bic ballpoint pens are 25 cents for a pack of 12, guess what Sears, JCPenney, Target, and all the other ones do the exact same day? They mark it down to at least roughly the same price, okay? Always. And then what Target and the other companies try and do is to say, look, don't just go to Walmart because they're cheaper with most things, right? Yes, more things than not will be cheaper, but at least I have one of their cheap items. Come in and buy it from me, and then as long as you buy something else, I will make money on the deal, all right? What the idea here is that the king sets the profit margin. If you can survive with the profit margin that they set up, great. You will continue to exist as a big box store. If you do not, if you cannot because you haven't been efficient enough, bye-bye. All right? And that's what's almost happened to, a great example for this right now is JCPenney. For those of you who don't know, JCPenney tried to break out of this mold. They tried to quit being a price follower because they weren't big enough. What did they do? They made themselves become JCP, right? And they tried to become this online entity that sold mostly online, and it didn't have any, any price, any coupons or anything anymore. They would just kind of say, oh, we're the cool place to shop because we've got a hashtag JCP. And we can tweet about our products on the internet. And all of you young people that know about the tweeting, we can be like a Tweety bird. And that's about how good their marketing program was, in case you were wondering. Because what JCPenney discovered after 2 years of trying to do this, they were almost in Chapter 11. They almost had to file for bankruptcy because it failed. Why? Because their marketing sucked. And Walmart basically said, oh yeah, everything that you're going to put on sale or even remotely get demand for, guess what we're going to do? We're going to suck the profit down on that particular item. We're going to drop our price, and you are going to get screwed. Right? No one gets away from Walmart. If they try to, Walmart points out that they can't. Now, you may think then, why doesn't Walmart kill all of its competition? Why don't they just lower the prices so far that JCPenney, Sears, Dillard's, all the other big box stores go bankrupt? Why don't they do that? I mean, they could. Very easily, actually. They would. Wouldn't they make more money, right? But what would happen if they killed all of their competition? Why? They wouldn't want a monopoly. Exactly. Walmart is very, very, very careful and makes sure that its price gives them a certain level of profit. So when they lower their prices so that they don't make as much profit and that Target and the other people don't make as much profit, but they still make profit. Because if they go broke, if all the other big box markets go broke and all that's left is Walmart, then the government steps in and says, oh, Walmart, all of your pricing schemes, we will now control them for you. And, I mean, Walmart, then they would only have to live with $10 billion of profit per year instead of the 50 to 100 that they make currently, every now and then. So, not a bad plan, right? And again, it's keeping things out there. Now, let's see. The other type of competition that they have is the quote-unquote coolness factor, or the book probably calls it more along the lines of tech competition, right? So when the car companies compete with each other, they don't lower the price. What they say is, well, if you buy a Chevy, you'll be able to have an onboard computer that will tell you exactly where to go at any given time, right? And that person who is telling you what to do will be M&M, right? Because that's what he advertises. Right? And, or Michael Jordan back before he decided to, screw anything that walked. So whatever. I mean, it was like the same thing for Tiger Woods too, right? I mean, it's like, come on, guys, keep it in your pants. All right, so don't ask me. I'm just reporting what I've been told. All right, so the coolness factor or tech, where new drives demand. So the idea here is that you're trying to get in to steal market share, but instead of doing it by lowering your price, you do it by telling people that we have the new stuff. We have the technologically advanced stuff, or, hey, we're cool. Right? And that, again, as you watch advertising, again, look for what they're doing, right? The reason that Walmart advertises price so much is that they want to make sure that all of the other competitors that they're out there know the prices are at and will set them accordingly. That's their job. Their advertising is to tell everybody else what to set the prices at. Not a bad thing. Now, there is one last type of oligopoly, which is really cool. These are fun, man. If If we did this in a micro class, we would probably spend 2 weeks on cartels, because those are fun. Well, yeah, they're really bad, but they're fun at the same time, from an analysis perspective. Does anybody know what a cartel is? Drug cartel is exactly the way these are based off of, although it's really OPEC. It was where it started. It was the oil companies back in the 70s. But the drug companies, or collectives, or whatever you want to call them in Mexico, yeah, they're pharmaceuticals. That's what they are. They're just more, advanced pharmaceuticals now. A cartel is where an oligopoly acts like a monopoly. So the idea is that if you've got 3 or 4 drug-creating entities, pharmaceutical creating entities, whatever the pharmaceutical might be, instead of having them compete against each other in production and sales, decide that this is the way we're going to divide up our product so that we have a certain price, right? So if a dime bag costs you $40, right? I mean, that's how much they're gonna produce, so that a dime bag costs $40. It's a dime bag of male enhancement, right? Because it's a pharmaceutical. So these drug cartels will sit down and say, in order for us to be able to charge that much to buy this particular pharmaceutical, whatever it is, they yes, well, exactly. If they have to, they kill the competition so that the price stays there. But then everybody else has to cut their production so that the price stays that high. So you've got 4 or 5 companies left that are producing said pharmaceutical, right? And they're all saying they're going to produce a quarter of what we normally can. Nothing wrong with it, right? And if they all do this forever, they could be rich forever. Not a problem. The problem is, what happens eventually if you've got 4 or 5 companies that are all saying that they're going to keep production cut low? Someone's going to get greedy. Now, why would, in a nice sort of pharmaceutical industry, would someone get greedy? Money is really, really hard not to have grow on you folks, right? The more you have, the more you want, okay? It's why rich people can't give up anything, right? Because the more you get, the more it's like, oh, I got to have, if I'm making $10 million a year, that's enough, but it's not really enough. I need to make 20, so you find the 20 million a year job, and if you find somewhere where you can make 20 million, you realize that 20 million is not enough because 2 yachts is not enough. You need to have 3, and so it's the nature of humanity. And it had happened to you guys too, I swear. Anyways, though, the idea is that they could exist in this utopian world where they're always making $10 million per person or company, or 10 billion, whatever the number is, if they would all just play nice. There is no cartel in history where the companies have not eventually cheated. The longest running cartels are about 4 or 5 years, and those are the early drug cartels that were just in the United States, like the Chicago and the New York ones back in the day in the 20s and 30s, before when there was alcohol mixed in them, Prohibition eras. Those are the ones that lasted the longest. And the reason they lasted the longest is that the deaths were very, very visible on a personal level, right? Because it was all local. And so when somebody got killed, they would drag the body around, and everybody would get to see what would happen to them, and you would know, right? Whereas the drug cartels in Mexico, you didn't know, right? Because they killed them all, but then they buried them in an unmarked grave out on the side of the road somewhere, and you didn't really get to see the grisly effect of what was going on. And so that's why they continue to fight and cheat and all the other things, right? And even in OPEC, if you think back in the 70s, right, when we had our first real problem with oil, when the price of oil jumped, or price of gasoline jumped from 92 cents a gallon to $1.85 a gallon. Can you imagine gas costing $1.85 a gallon? I mean, it was awful, awful. The entire United States of America almost shut down because gas was up to $1.85 a gallon. It was terrible. I lived through that. I was starting to drive at that time. I quit driving, folks. I couldn't afford it anymore. Because it says $1.85. Yeah, I know, it sounds really great now. But back then it was really scary. Lasted for about 4 or 5 years. You know what killed it? You know what killed the OPEC cartel? What stopped them from acting like a monopoly? There was no war yet. I mean, we didn't go in, I mean, the American government didn't go in and attack. Oh no, we kept buying. The sad thing is that the demand for U.S. oil was on the rise the entire time. We started, I mean, even through that doubling the price of gas, our demand for oil actually went up. I mean, it didn't go up as much as it had prior, but it still was going up. So it wasn't like there wasn't demand. It wasn't like we weren't buying the oil from them. The reason that it stopped is because Iraq decided that they wanted to take over Iran. That was the start of the Iran-Iraq War, 1978. And what Iraq did was said, okay, we were normally producing about 20 to 25% of what we could produce. They jacked up to 100%. Sold as much oil as they could for 6 months, and then bombed the shit out of Iran. Then it was war. I mean, not right away, but it took long enough, right? And the key to cartels is that eventually cheaters kill it, right? Because once one person cheats, what do all the other competitors have to do? They have to up their production. They have to cheat as well. And basically what ends up happening is that when you have a cartel that breaks down, the price of that product actually will rotate back into a more monopolistic competition lifestyle. And you actually start to see some levels of efficiency, right? So for a while, gas prices went back down below 90 cents a gallon right after in the early 80s. It was great. I was driving all over the place. 85 cents a gallon. Who cares if I had a 1977 Chevelle station wagon that got, 8 miles to the gallon? I didn't care anymore, right? When I saved enough money to get to fix the autopilot, and I could, set it up on cruise control and just cruise. I was so cool. I had my feet out the window while I was driving. Hell yeah, it was awesome. All right. Anyways, that is chapter 9. Oligopolies, monopolistic competitions. Test next week, midterm. I will put the study guide and some review questions on Blackboard sometime this afternoon before I go home, so 4:30-ish. Do you want some homework for chapter 9?
Not really.
What? You don't? You don't want any? Oh, maybe a little, right? How about just 3 questions and one of them's odd? I won't assign any from chapter 10. How's that sound? That's Wednesday. So Wednesday, we will talk about labor markets. We will talk about calculating how you get wages and who are the major players in mucking with wages and salaries for employees. Have I not put them in a while?
You haven't put them in yet.
I haven't put anything in for you guys yet?
No.
Oh, why didn't you say something?
Kind of a mystery.
Okay, I can put them in. I have them set up. I mean, the problem with it is that it's like about, at this stage, it's about 15% of your grade, maybe less, because the most of the grade is going to come from the midterms and the final and your attendance as so far, etc. So I suppose I could put that in there too. So maybe it's more like 20%. All right, so quiz on Wednesday, though. We will still have a quiz on Wednesday over chapter 8 and 9, since we made it through all of chapter 9 today. So be ready for that on Wednesday. Nobody snuck in late, did they? I didn't see. Yeah, where was was Brandon. And no Cassie or Brittany. And no Mariah in the middle row either. I don't understand. Pumpkin spice crispy bar? Is that good?
Oh, yeah.